Hey there. Tonight we slip beneath the surface, not just beneath your blanket or beneath the weight of your eyelids, but truly beneath, down into the earth itself, through narrow stone passages, past thick walls that whisper of forgotten fears, into places where people lived, worked, prayed, and sometimes never came back up. Imagine waking up in darkness, not by accident, not from a power outage, but because that's just where you live. Your kitchen, your neighbours, your animals, even your church, all tucked neatly beneath 20 stories of volcanic rock. You probably wouldn't survive this. Not the claustrophobia, not the constant ducking or the hushed footsteps, or the eerie silence broken only by breath. But tonight, you don't have to survive it. You only have to imagine it. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me, where are you listening from? And what time is it for you? I love seeing who else is out there, up late, gently drifting through the past with me. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You start above ground, in the middle of central Turkey. The town is modern, sleepy, its rooftops dotted with satellite dishes, laundry lines, and the soft bark of a dog echoing down the alley. But under your feet lies a city no one truly built. They carved it. Derinkuyu. It means deep well, and it is. A vertical maze of hallways, rooms, churches, wineries, stables and crypts, all of it hidden beneath dusty soil. As you descend through the first tunnel, you notice how the air changes, cooler, dry, thick with the scent of pumice and thyme. The walls press in. You have to duck, and then you descend more, down a narrow sloping corridor that curves like a burrow. One level becomes 2, then 3. Derinkuyu goes at least 20 levels deep, and may have housed as many as 20,000 people during times of siege. Imagine that. A small city entirely underground, no windows, no sunrises, no rain, just flickering oil lamps and the quiet rhythm of footfalls. Historians still argue who built the earliest parts. Some say it was the Phrygians, around 800 BCE. Others suggest early Christians later expanded it during the Byzantine era. The rock is soft volcanic tuff, easy to carve, yet stable, perfect for desperate people with pickaxes and time. You move past niches carved into walls, maybe for candles, maybe for statues, past empty rooms where grain was stored, where water trickled in through secret aquifers, where mothers rocked their children without ever seeing the sky. There are rooms that once held animals, yes, underground stables, because what good is survival if your goats and chickens are left behind? You duck through a circular opening, the ceiling low, the floor dusty. The passage narrows, then opens again into a large hall, perhaps once a chapel. The walls are bare, no frescoes here, but you can feel the reverence in the space. You step into another tunnel, this one smaller, more defensive, because Derinkuyu wasn't just a home, it was a refuge, a hiding place during war, persecution, or invasion. The kind of place you don't just build, you dig out of necessity. One fringe theory, probably not true but fun to imagine, says the city was built as protection from aliens, or giants, or biblical floods. But the more grounded reality, empires rose and fell on this land. Romans, Byzantines, Seljuks, Ottomans, and whenever things got bad up there, people came down here. You imagine the moment. A lookout sees riders on the horizon. Shouts echo, doors slam, and one by one, families disappear below ground, rolling stone doors shut behind them. For weeks they live by candlelight. They grind flour in hand-cranked mills. They whisper prayers in hidden chapels. Children play games in the sand-packed corners. And above them, silence, or worse, enemy footsteps. It's strange, isn't it? How much human history has been shaped not by towering monuments, but by the urge to hide, to go underground, to survive by vanishing. And here in Derinkuyu, you can feel that urge, fossilized into stone. You pause in one hallway, touch the wall. It's smooth, cool, worn down by thousands of fingers just like yours. People who are afraid or faithful, or both. They carved their safety one scrape at a time. And it worked. Derinkuyu was never discovered by its enemies during active use. The rediscovery came much later, in 1963, when a local man knocked down a wall in his home and found a tunnel, and then another, and another, until he realised his house stood on the threshold of an entire forgotten city. The realisation must have felt like falling into a dream, or a very dusty nightmare. But for you, tonight, it's just the beginning. You haven't even seen the wine presses yet, or the vertical shafts, or the rolling doors that once locked this city shut like a tomb. Those are still ahead, just a few more steps beneath the earth. You keep walking, the air grows cooler, and the stone starts to hum. Or maybe that's just your heartbeat, echoing through the ancient tunnels of people who lived not beneath society, but within the earth itself. You keep moving downward. The slope of the tunnel shifts just slightly, and your feet find the worn footholds carved by centuries of careful steps. There's no handrail, just the stone, always the stone. It presses in gently, like a familiar weight. Not quite a hug, not quite a trap, somewhere in between. You arrive at a wide chamber. The floor flattens out, and for a moment there's space, enough to straighten your back, enough to breathe in the deeper quiet that lives down here. To your left is something unexpected, a wine press, not a symbolic one, not a ceremonial remnant, a real practical wine press, cut into the floor like a basin, with a shallow channel for juice to flow into waiting jars. Because even underground, especially underground, people made wine. It was for celebration, yes, but also for disinfection, for sacred rituals, for comfort. You imagine the clink of amphorae, the splash of purple against pumice, the murmured blessing before the first sip. Historians still argue whether these underground presses were built by the early Christian communities that hid here during the Byzantine period, or whether they date back to earlier Zoroastrian or Roman influences. Whoever made them, they did not plan to live here in fear alone. There are other rooms, dozens, arranged like apartments, each one carved with surprising regularity. You peek into one that holds a low stone bed carved directly from the wall. A niche above it, probably for an oil lamp, and in the corner, a squat toilet chamber. Yes, plumbing, crude but intentional. A communal shaft nearby suggests the flow of waste followed a downward path, as waste often does. Clever, if slightly gross. You step back into the main corridor and turn right, ducking through a tighter entrance that leads to a chapel. The space opens up again, vaulted in that raw hand-hewn way. A central platform might have served as an altar, or a pulpit, or both. There are no frescoes left, but tiny crossmarks have been etched along the walls, some neat and symmetrical, others lopsided, like a child's first signature. Imagine services held here, a baby baptised in dim lamplight, the rustle of robes, the whispered cadence of a psalm rising through stone. Not much singing, though. Sound carries too well down here, and danger was often listening. Beyond the chapel, a narrower passage splits. One leads to storage rooms, where grain was packed in woven bags and jars. The other leads to a schoolroom, Yes, a literal classroom. You imagine children sitting cross-legged on packed earth, scratching letters into dust with sticks. A teacher with a worn voice, reciting prayers or poetry, or the names of emperors. What did they dream of, these children of the rock? A world with trees, maybe, birdsong, skinned knees on cobbled streets. Or maybe they were perfectly content with the rhythm of this place, its predictability, its protection, its quiet sense of order. A fringe theory, again not widely accepted, suggests Derinkuyu may have been a monastic complex, used by ascetics seeking solitude, a kind of spiritual bunker. It's not impossible. There's something oddly peaceful about the layout, almost contemplative. You pause to rest on a carved bench. The stone is cold beneath you. You listen. Far away, something drips. Is it water, sweat, time? You're not sure, but there's a feeling in your chest. Not quite dread, not quite awe. The peculiar intimacy of being in a place made by hands for survival. And not just survival, community. Because everywhere you look, there are signs of people building not just shelters, but society. There's a space believed to be a communal kitchen, long troughs carved into the floor, blackened ceilings from centuries of soot. And here's the strange part. Ventilation shafts that snake upward, hidden in the rock, disguised at the surface with stones and shrubs. The smoke could escape without ever betraying the city's location. That level of engineering, in the dark, with nothing but chisels, it's humbling, and just a little maddening. You crouch beside one of the smoke-blackened walls and run a finger over the soot. It comes away grey, ash from a meal cooked centuries ago, a stew maybe, or a flatbread crisped on a hot stone. Someone stirred that pot. Someone waited for it to boil. Someone tasted the broth and added more salt. And all of it happened beneath your feet. Above ground, the world was war-torn, unstable. Empires clashing, land shifting hands. But down here, people lived. Not in the grand historical sense, but in the deeply ordinary one. They raised goats. They baked bread. They whispered bedtime stories to children in the half-light of oil lamps. And as you stand now in the centre of this underground neighbourhood, you realise something strange. This isn't a ruin, not really. It's a memory, one you're borrowing just for tonight. And there's more still to see. Circular doors, air shafts, and the long descent into the deeper levels, where even memory grows thin. You stand, brush dust from your knees, and step back into the tunnel. Ahead, the air grows cooler again, and the silence waits. You follow the slope downward once more. The floor angles gently, like a whispered suggestion. You keep moving. The light from your lamp, imagined or otherwise, throws shadows on the curved walls. They dance as you walk, stone ghosts with nowhere else to be. Ahead, something looms. A circular opening in the tunnel, wide enough for your shoulders. Just past it, wedged slightly into the wall, a perfectly round stone disc. It's enormous, maybe 5 feet across, rough-hewn, thick. This is a rolling door, and it's brilliant. Because while Derinkuyu welcomed its own, it didn't exactly leave a welcome mat out for strangers. These circular stone doors, called millstones or blocking stones, were the ancient equivalent of an airlock. Roll it into place from the inside, and you've just sealed a passage tight. To get through it, an invader would need a battering ram and a very bad sense of direction. You lean forward. There's a carved notch at one edge of the door, just big enough to poke a spear through. Imagine it. A siege happening in complete darkness. Shouts from behind the stone. A spear thrust out of the slit, just in case. Or maybe a whispered challenge. Who goes there? Historians still debate the actual use patterns. Were these doors always in place, ready to be rolled shut, or did they keep them tucked in alcoves, used only during emergencies? Some believe the latter, which would explain the recessed storage spaces nearby. One thing's certain, these weren't just symbolic, they were functional, heavy, effective, and also incredibly cool. You try not to imagine rolling one of these in your apartment hallway, but admit it would solve a lot of problems. Moving past the door, the tunnel narrows again. This one's steeper. You're now on level 5, maybe 6. The rooms are tighter here, the ceiling's lower, but everything is still precise, functional. You step into what seems like a ventilation chamber. The shaft above you rises straight up, out of sight. Just a dark void disappearing into the ceiling. This right here is what kept Derinkuyu alive. The city contains a complex air circulation system, including a central shaft that doubles as a well. Clean air flowed down through hidden vents, smoke escaped through side channels. And water? It was drawn from underground sources, some say even from cisterns that never breached the surface. It's tempting to think this was advanced engineering, and maybe it was, or maybe it was just necessity doing its best work. As one archaeologist put it, people tend to get creative when the alternative is suffocation. You move farther into the tunnels, a sudden branch, left or right. You pick left, always left. The stone here is drier, almost powdery. You pass another small chamber, this one with shelves carved directly into the wall. Storage, maybe, or possibly something else. One fringe theory suggests these shelves were used to hold beehives, brought down temporarily during times of siege. Honey would have been an incredibly useful food source. Long-lasting, medicinal, sweet. Also, bees in tunnels. Terrifying. But there's no buzzing now, just quiet. You move on. There's a new smell in the air, not unpleasant. Earthy, like old parchment and moss. You duck into a chamber believed to be a prison. Yes, really. Some small rooms have doors that open inward, but couldn't be opened from the inside. No windows, no vents. It's theorised that disobedience, whether religious, civil or otherwise, had consequences here. Even underground societies need order. You back out slowly. The space feels heavy, and then you arrive somewhere surprising. A long, low tunnel believed to be a passageway to another city, because Derinkuyu wasn't alone. Other underground cities, Kaimakli for example, lie nearby, some less than 10 kilometres away. And some historians believe that at least one of them may have been connected. Imagine that. 2 entire cities linked by a tunnel you could barely crawl through. You and your neighbour, 10 kilometres apart, exchanging grain, stories or gossip, without ever seeing the sky. No phones, no maps, just torchlight and memory. That tunnel, by the way, hasn't been fully explored. It might be collapsed, or maybe it leads even farther than we think. Another mystery buried beneath volcanic ash. You return to the central corridor. Pause, breathe. Your knees ache a little. Even in imagination, Derinkuyu is not for the faint of heart, but you've only reached level 7, and there's more still below. Crypts, bunkers, maybe secrets no one has yet disturbed. You glance back at the rolling door. It's still there, still ready to close, still whispering a lesson about boundaries, protection, and silence. Somewhere behind it, someone once waited, listened, hoped, and lived. You move on. The ceiling dips, the shadows stretch, and below you, always below you, the earth hums. The tunnel slopes again, this time more sharply. The air grows stiller, less moved, less lived in. You run your hand along the wall. Dust clings to your skin like sleep to eyelashes. You're deep now, maybe level 8, maybe deeper, Hard to tell. There were no signs, only the quiet. The corridor narrows. This one wasn't made for wagons or livestock. It was made for people who didn't want to be followed. You crouch slightly, edging through the curve, and just when you begin to wonder if this path will ever open again, you step out into the largest chamber you've seen yet. It stretches wider than expected, its ceiling just tall enough for your shoulders to relax. And here, for the first time, you see something unusual. Columns, not Greek or Roman, nothing with scrolls or fluting. Just fat, simple support beams, carved from the very stone that surrounds you, holding up the earth like tired arms. This was not just a common room. This was a meeting hall. You picture a fire pit in the centre, benches or mats along the perimeter, elders discussing matters of survival, mothers wrapping bread in cloth, children eavesdropping while pretending to sleep. This was where community happened. It's tempting to romanticize these moments. But remember, if they were here, they were probably hiding. From Persians, from Arabs, from Crusaders, who exactly chased them below? Historians still argue. The Byzantine era was turbulent, especially for religious minorities. Some say it was Arab raids. Others blame Turkish incursions. Some claim it was simply fear, the persistent hum of just in case. You settle onto a carved ledge and take in the room. There are grooves in the floor, perhaps for drainage or seating arrangements, or rituals we no longer understand. One odd thing, on the far wall a faded carving, not clear enough to identify. A symbol maybe, or just someone's idle mark, a spiral, a fish, hard to say. Fringe theorists claim these are prehistoric signs, older than the city itself, that the builders stumbled upon older caves, that Derinkuyu was expanded from something even more ancient. There's no proof, but the idea lingers, because you are, after all, standing inside a place shaped by people whose names we don't even know. And that's something. You pass beyond the hall into a narrower corridor, its floor uneven, shaped more by function than comfort. Along the sides, carved shelves appear, not for storage. These are too short, too wide. Tombs. This is a burial corridor, not decorative, not public, hidden. You step carefully, out of respect, and something else. You're not sure if it's reverence or curiosity. The dead weren't always buried down here. Most were taken back up when it was safe. But sometimes there wasn't time. Or it wasn't safe. Or there was illness. You try not to think about that. Instead you imagine the rituals. A quiet prayer, a woven shroud, a handful of dust returned to dust. There's no writing, no headstones, just these shelves, and the memory of breath that once warmed the air you now inhale. You pass another stone door. It's already shut. And that's fine. Not every passage needs to be opened. Beyond it, the tunnel bends toward what feels like the oldest part. How can you tell? The walls are less precise, less polished. You duck into a chamber with low benches carved into the stone. One long wall covered in pockmarks. Deep, symmetrical. Some believe this was a workshop, used for sharpening tools or grinding grain. Others think it was a school of stonemasons, training the next generation in the only trade that mattered, digging. Historians disagree on how long Derinkuyu was in use. Some say centuries. Others say it was abandoned and rediscovered multiple times, like a story rewritten with every war. But no one doubts the labour it required. All of this, without drills, without bulldozers, just chisels and stubbornness. You touch the wall again. There are faint notches, each one from a pickaxe swung by a tired hand. Maybe by someone with calloused fingers and a soft voice. Someone who dug for their children, or their faith, or simply for a chance to sleep safely. You duck through the next low passage and find something stranger than usual. A well, perfectly circular, deep, still. The water glints in the light. cold, clear. This isn't just a marvel, it's a mystery, because the shaft seems to tap into a deep aquifer, one still not fully understood by geologists. And its dual purpose, water and ventilation? Yes, the same tunnel that quenched thirst also kept people breathing. You sit for a moment beside it. The stone rim is smooth from centuries of use, and the air, even here, feels oddly fresh. It's easy to forget how clever humans are, especially when you're surrounded by Wi-Fi and coffee pods. But here, down here, you remember, necessity doesn't ask for elegance, only solutions. And so they found them, in silence, in shadow, in stone. Above your head, the world may be spinning, empires rising and falling, markets crashing, skies raining or shining. But below it all, in places like this, people made do, made life, and somehow made wine. You stand, stretch your back. The well behind you sighs quietly. Time to go deeper. The path waits, and it always leads down. Your knees protest slightly now, but the earth is unbothered. It doesn't care how long you've been walking. It only receives. You press forward. The corridor tightens again. Not claustrophobic, but purposeful, like the shape of lungs when they're holding something in. The floor underfoot changes subtly. Less smooth, more compacted ash and grit. This stretch feels older, more used, more secret. You pass small side rooms. Some are utterly bare. Others contain strange remnants, chunks of pottery, charred residue in corners, a rusted nail driven into a ledge. You pass what may have been a livestock pen, the air still holding the memory of wool and ammonia. Or maybe that's just your mind, filling in the blanks. You squint. There's a carved trough, and beside it, the faint outline of a niche where a lantern once sat. That alone tells you something critical. They cared for their animals, fed them, lit a lamp so they wouldn't panic in the dark. Imagine that. Bringing your goats with you during an invasion. Because upstairs was unsafe. Because survival depended on wool, milk, meat, and not being alone. Historians still debate how long families stayed underground at a time. Was it weeks, months? Did some grow up never seeing the sun? The deeper you go, the harder it becomes to believe this was just a temporary measure. You reach a crossroad. Both paths curve out of sight. You pick the one that descends. Because of course you do. As you move, the walls widen again, slightly. You emerge into a cool square room. Here you find what looks like a school of fish, carved crudely into the walls. Repeated over and over, sometimes upright, sometimes sideways. Fish, the ancient Christian symbol, used as a sign of safety, of faith in hiding. People would draw it in the dust to test each other. A line here, a curve there. If you knew, you'd complete the symbol. If not, well, it was just a doodle. The tunnels grow darker. Even in imagination, your breath slows. You reach a chamber with strange acoustics. Every sound echoes back to you in halves. A whisper becomes a secret. A sigh becomes a song. You stand in the centre and say nothing, just listening, letting the walls do the talking. It's believed this chamber, round and domed, was used as a gathering hall, maybe even for music. Imagine it, a flute playing, a drum tapping a low rhythm against the floor, a voice singing into stone and having it sing back. Not loud, never loud. This was a place for quiet celebration, for resilience dressed in harmony. It's strange, but something about this place makes your shoulders drop, like the rock itself is singing still. Just for you, you move on. Down another slope, this one gentler, and here you see something you weren't expecting. A hole in the wall, wide enough to crawl through, ringed with tool marks and soot. A tunnel connector. This may be the one that leads to Kai Mackley. the sister city to Derinkuyu. Some claim they're linked, others say it's a myth, but the tunnel is real. And even though it's collapsed in places, the idea alone is enough. Two entire underground civilizations, holding hands beneath a landscape of ruin and empire. What did they say to each other? Did children make the journey? Did someone fall in love between cities? Or was it more practical? A trade route. Barley for wool, salt for prayers. You press your hand to the tunnel edge. The stone is cool, smoother here. Someone came through often. And recently, by the look of it. That's the strange thing. Derinkuyu was lost for centuries, covered over by memory and ash, rediscovered only in 1963 by accident. A man knocked down a wall in his home and found a tunnel. That tunnel led to rooms. Those rooms led to more. And suddenly, an entire city opened beneath a living one. Imagine that. You knock down drywall looking for more storage and instead find a civilization. That's how casually history hides. You move past the tunnel and pause in another wide room. This one contains grinding stones. A mill, perhaps, still mounted in grooves, as if the workers just stepped away. Grain would have been precious, stored in jars, rationed carefully. There are rumours, fringe of course, that the people of Derinkuyu developed a seed stock immune to mould, stored in clay pots buried in dust. It's unproven, but then again, you're walking through a city that still breathes. So who's to say what's impossible? You run your fingers along a groove, stone worn down by years of rotation, by someone's daily motion, back and forth, back and forth. Survival isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's just repetition. One more grind, one more scoop, one more hour alive. You leave the mill and pass a carved alcove holding a flat slab, perhaps a table. It's cracked now. But once maybe it held loaves of bread, or a letter scratched into bark, or nothing at all. Just stone waiting for purpose. Everywhere you turn, there are signs of life lived slowly. Not rushed, not panicked, just intentional. You keep walking. Your footsteps echo faintly, like someone following just out of view. But there's no one there, just history, watching, waiting. And deeper still, a room you haven't seen yet. A chamber for healing, they say. Next time. For now, you rest. The corridor bends again, slowly now, as if the city itself is easing into quiet. You trail your fingers along the curved wall. The texture here is different. Not freshly carved, but worn down by the brush of countless shoulders. The passage opens into a low rectangular room. You step inside and feel the air shift slightly. Cooler, staler, but somehow softer. There's a long bench carved directly from the wall and another across from it. Between them a shallow stone basin, cracked, empty, but once it may have held water or oil or something more precious than either. Quiet. This was likely a healing room, or perhaps a place for bathing. Historians still debate whether it was for ritual cleansing, basic sanitation, or something else entirely. Some fringe theorists argue the basin aligns with certain solar angles, but it's hard to say how much sun ever reached this deep. What's clear is this: it was designed for stillness. You sit on the ledge. The stone is smooth, polished by years of human presence. You imagine someone tending to a wound here, gently cleaning it with herbs gathered above. Perhaps a mother humming while wiping dust from a child's face. Perhaps silence, just the sound of dripping water, the shuffle of feet in a neighbouring corridor. Even in an underground world, people needed care. And this is what's easy to forget. That survival wasn't just hiding from danger. It was making space for life to keep happening, even when the sky was falling. You leave the healing room and duck through another narrow passage. It's short, only a few steps. But as you emerge into the next chamber, you freeze, because this is unlike anything else so far. Circular, tall, ventilated. This is the central shaft, one of Derinkuyu's most brilliant features. It runs through the heart of the city, a vertical tunnel reaching up toward the surface. And down through the deepest levels, a lifeline. Air flows gently upward. And when you tilt your head back, you almost think you can see light, but it's probably just a flicker of your imagination. There are footholds carved into the wall. Climbers would have ascended and descended here, hauling supplies, carrying messages, just breathing. Because this shaft did more than vent stale air. It connected everything, like a spine. If someone dropped a bucket here, you'd hear the splash several floors down. If someone called out, their voice would spiral up like smoke. Some believe the shaft also served as an alarm system. A cry from one level could reach many, and if sealed from below, it could trap an intruder in a maze of dead ends and stone doors. The architecture here isn't just practical, it's tactical and elegant. You lean against the wall and feel it again. That subtle breeze, proof that even the earth can breathe if you carve its lungs carefully. You follow a side corridor now, this one sloping down in a corkscrew pattern. It's disorienting at first, but it eventually empties into a room with a familiar scent. Earth, yeast, smoke, a kitchen, not the kind with a stove and shiny pans, but still, a space meant for food. There are shallow fire pits carved into the floor, domed alcoves in the walls where pots once sat, and a narrow flue that carried smoke up through winding channels, disguising its origin. Because if the enemy above saw smoke, they'd know someone was hiding below. Historians agree this was a critical design feature. Cooking was dangerous, but also non-negotiable. You picture it, flatbreads sizzling on hot stones, soups bubbling slowly, children waiting impatiently for anything warm. You lean into a niche and close your eyes. The heat is gone now, but the intention remains. This is where someone fed their family, where someone survived a siege, by stirring lentils. You leave the kitchen and move toward another cluster of small rooms. Bedrooms? Storage? Impossible to say. One room is oddly shaped, like a sideways teardrop. Its floor slopes ever so slightly downward. And in the far corner, a hollow. Inside it, scraps of something pale. Plaster? Or bone? It's unclear. But here's the strange thing. Etched above the hollow is a single star. 5 points. Simple. No one knows what it meant. Some say it marked a sacred corner, a place for prayer or sleep. Others think it was just a doodle, something carved in passing, never meant to be remembered. But here you are, remembering it anyway. And this is how memory works down here, not with names or dates, but with marks in stone, echoes in air. You press forward again, deeper still. You're beginning to feel the layout of the city, its rhythm, how it breathes. Every slope is deliberate, every narrow hallway a test, every open space an exhale. And soon you reach another one of those strange stone doors. A disc the size of a wagon wheel, perfectly balanced in its slot. Meant to be rolled shut and locked from the inside. You reach out and touch it. Cool. Solid. Still. There's no handle, just a carved indentation, a kind of fingerprint left by fear. You wonder, what was the last moment this door was sealed? Was it during a raid or a drill? Was someone panicking or calm and practiced? Some say there are up to 20 of these stone doors in Derinkuyu, each positioned to protect a level, a hallway, a home. You step past it now, leaving it open, because the danger is long gone. But even in your imagination, you can feel it. The rush of footsteps, the quiet command, the click of the lock, and then silence, until now, because you've come back. You move on in silence now, the kind of silence that has its own weight, a hush that feels earned, like the city is listening to you as much as you are to it. This level seems more orderly. The walls are smoother. The rooms are more symmetrical. You get the sense that this space wasn't improvised. It was planned, designed for something bigger. You pass a corridor with shallow alcoves carved rhythmically into each side. They're small, uniform, and empty. Some say this was a storeroom, each alcove holding dried fruit, grain, or tools. Others suggest something more spiritual, a space for relics, or even resting places. Historians still argue whether Derinkuyu housed its dead below ground. There's little physical evidence, but certain passageways feel sacred. This one does. Your footsteps seem quieter here, and you instinctively lower your voice, even though there's no one to disturb. The next room is taller than the others. A domed ceiling rises above you, its surface pitted and scalloped with age. A large flat stone sits in the centre of the floor. Not a table, not an altar exactly. Just there, waiting. A shaft of light trickles in from a narrow opening far above. It moves like water on the walls, and you catch yourself staring. This might have been a meeting place, a council room, or maybe a place of worship. The structure suggests importance. In one corner, you spot more carvings. This time, animals. A goat, a bird, something like a dog. Crude but intentional. There's a pattern to them, but it's hard to read. Some archaeologists suggest they're totemic markers. Others dismiss them as children's drawings. It's difficult to date them with precision. The walls don't give up their secrets easily. You take a slow walk around the room. The acoustics here are strange. Not echoey like the music chamber, but muffled. Like every sound is pulled inward and folded into the rock. This room absorbs you. And then something curious. A stairwell carved into the far wall, narrow and steep, like it's trying not to be noticed. You descend. The air thickens slightly. The dust smells older, and suddenly you're standing in a school room, or what might have been. Small indentations are carved in rows into the floor. Shallow basins maybe for sitting, or kneeling. The walls are covered with faint markings, lines, curves, scratches that might have been letters, or numbers, or just practice strokes. Some fringe historians believe Derinkuyu hosted secret religious education, teaching forbidden texts, passing on knowledge banned by whichever empire loomed above. Others think these marks were games, counting stones, guessing symbols. Either way, it tells you something vital. Even underground, even hiding, they wanted to learn. You crouch beside one of the shallow seats and imagine a child there, legs tucked, fingers tracing symbols in the dust. You can almost hear a voice reading aloud, software measured, soothing, not for excitement, not even for understanding, just for remembering. Because memory was survival. Language was armour. You rise again and follow a side tunnel branching off the schoolroom. This one feels different. Less carved, more natural. It narrows suddenly, forcing you to duck. The air changes, cooler, damp. You press forward, and the tunnel opens into a tiny chamber. A well. It's dry now, long dry, but once it would have been the city's lifeline. Carved from volcanic rock, fed by underground springs, and guarded. There are signs of that. Grooves for locking mechanisms, a slot where a lid once rested. Because poisoning a well was the oldest trick in the book, and in Derinkuyu, water was worth more than gold. Some speculate that the well connected to others, a network of reservoirs deeper still, but that remains unproven. Just theories written on faded maps and in footnotes of footnotes. You kneel beside it. You imagine the hands that drew this water, the buckets, the quiet splash, the hope that it wouldn't run dry. And you notice something carved into the rim. 3 concentric circles, no inscription, just a symbol. Some say it represented continuity, others think it marked ownership, or a warning, but maybe it was just decoration. Something to make the water feel sacred. You stand again, bones creaking slightly. It's easy to forget how long you've been underground. The air is still, but not dead. You move again into another corridor. This one rises slightly, and as it does, you pass animal bones embedded into the walls, placed intentionally, patterned. A fringe theory suggests this was symbolic, an offering, protection, or maybe even a calendar, each bone marking a season passed below the surface. You reach a room with more signs of habitation, a stone cot, a hollow carved in the wall for storage, scraps of charcoal near a vent hole, a home, one of hundreds, maybe thousands. And in that moment, you remember something simple. These weren't just people in hiding. They were builders, planners, parents, teachers, survivors. And this place, Derinkyu, wasn't just a shelter. It was a city, full of rhythm, of quiet, of daily life underground. And you're walking through it still. The slope beneath your feet turns gentle again, as if the city is coaxing you onward, like a lull in a song. The passage is smooth here, noticeably smoother, almost polished, and the air tastes subtly different, cooler, but tinged with something mineral. You glance up. The ceiling above you glitters faintly, tiny specks of mica catching your lamplight in flickers. A little underground starlight, just for you. The corridor gently bends, then widens, and you step into a space unlike the others. This is a winery. Yes, a full-blown ancient winery. You wouldn't expect that in a subterranean stronghold, but people will always find ways to make something delicious ferment, especially when you're stuck underground for months. Carved into the rock are shallow pits, likely for pressing grapes. Channels run from these basins toward collection troughs. Some pits are circular, others oval, as if different families use different methods. Or maybe they just weren't fussy about uniformity. Archaeologists believe Derinkyu's inhabitants grew vines on the surface when times were safe, then stored or processed the harvest below. Wine served many purposes, ritual, medicinal, or just something to dull the anxiety of being 80 feet underground for half the year. There's an old joke that history is just people trying not to die. With snacks. This winery proves that sometimes people also try to feel human. You lean against the wall and for a moment you picture it. A group of neighbours passing around a clay cup, savouring a tart sip, maybe laughing softly, or singing. Imagine the acoustics, laughter bouncing off walls, swirling up stone staircases, warming a place that had no sun. Some historians think Derinkyu wasn't just a wartime refuge. It may have been inhabited seasonally or intermittently for centuries. In some records, it's linked with early Christian communities fleeing Roman persecution. In others, it's described as a sanctuary from marauding armies or brutal weather. But how people used it, and for how long, is still debated. What's agreed upon is that Derinkyu was too complex, too functional, too human to be just a panic room. And so you move on, down another tight passage where the air smells faintly of copper and ash. Your shoulders brush stone on either side. This hallway narrows into another chamber, this one very low, almost crouching height. You stoop instinctively, moving slowly until the space opens again into what looks unmistakably like a prison cell. At least that's the theory. The room is small, maybe 6 feet by 8. There's a notch in the wall, too short for a cot, too wide for a niche. The entrance is easily sealed with another rolling door. It feels enclosed, purposefully so. One fringe theory posits that this was a punishment cell for those who violated community rules. Another suggests it was storage, or maybe simply a secure space for valuables. Still, you can't help but pause a moment longer here. If someone were held in this room, it would have been total sensory deprivation. No light, no sound. Just the weight of the earth pressing down through 10 stories of volcanic tuff. You press on quickly, re-emerging into a wider corridor. The air is better here, dry, moving again. And as you turn the next corner, you stop. Because this room is unlike the others. It's enormous. You're standing at the edge of a communal stable. Yes, an underground stable. You can smell it in the stone. Damp, faintly musky, like the ghosts of hooves. Shallow troughs are carved along the walls. Small niches in the corners probably once held hay or grain. There are even tiny windows, high above the ground level. No larger than slits, but perfect for circulating air. Some archaeologists believe animals were brought down here during sieges. Donkeys, chickens, maybe even goats. Imagine the logistics. Guiding a stubborn donkey down a sloping tunnel, past kitchens and storerooms and schoolrooms. It sounds impossible, until you remember necessity is history's greatest architect. If your livelihood depended on those animals, you brought them with you, even underground. There's something touching about that, isn't there? That survival meant not just hiding, but bringing the whole ecosystem down with you. Family, tools, livestock, hope. You take a seat on the edge of a feeding trough, and for a moment, just a moment, you hear the echo of a soft bray. It's not real, of course, but your imagination is good company down here. Some scholars think these stables doubled as barricade points too, that they were deliberately placed at choke points in the structure. If invaders ever made it this far, the defenders could herd animals into the tunnels, block doors, and confuse the layout. Historians still debate how often this was used in practice, but it shows the level of detail in the planning. Because Derinkuyu isn't just deep, it's brilliant. As you stand again and stretch your legs, you feel it. The layers above and below you. This isn't a ruin, it's a system. And with that, the hallway curves once more, inviting you onward. Toward the next room, the next mark in the stone, the next echo. Because the further you go, the more this city begins to feel alive. Your footfall softens now. The floor here has a kind of give to it. Packed earth over stone, worn smooth by centuries of movement. You run your hand along the wall as you walk. It's cooler, slightly moist, as though this part of the city breathes a little slower than the rest. You enter what can only be described as the heart of Derinkuyu. It's not the largest room you've seen, nor the most elaborate, but something about it feels central. There are low benches carved directly into the perimeter of the room, forming a circular shape, not for sleeping or working, but for gathering, for listening, or speaking. A niche at one end, raised slightly, suggests a platform. This may have been where the elders sat, or a speaker stood. Maybe decisions were made here. When to hide, when to surface, when to share, or when to ration. In a city without windows, maybe this room was the city's eyes. Some historians believe Derinkuyu operated through a council system, likely elders from each family unit. Others suggest a more hierarchical approach, some kind of religious leadership taking precedence. There's no writing on the walls to confirm either. But the structure, it implies equality, everyone facing inward, everyone close enough to hear without raising a voice. You sit on one of the benches, hands resting on stone that once supported the worries of strangers long gone. Maybe this is where someone announced a birth, a death, a celebration, or bad news from the surface, because life down here didn't pause. It kept ticking, like a watch sealed in a pocket. A faint draft stirs your hair, and you notice a thin shaft of air flowing from a carved vent in the wall. And that's when you remember. You haven't suffocated yet. Derinkuyu wasn't just deep, it was ventilated. You pass into the next corridor and tilt your head upward. High above, so high you can't see the end, is one of the city's famed ventilation shafts. Over 50 of them snake vertically through the structure, some plunging nearly 180 feet. They're narrow, precise, angled to carry both air and sound. And you realise the people here understood fluid dynamics before it had a name. Even more remarkable, the shafts were also water wells, dual-purpose engineering. Rainwater and cool air descended, stale breath and smoke rose. It's like Derinkuyu inhaled and exhaled with the rhythm of its people. Some shafts opened only within the city, hidden from the surface to prevent detection. Others were camouflaged under rocks, vegetation, or even small buildings above. Clever, quiet, and crucial. There's debate over whether these shafts were later modified or expanded. Some claim that Byzantine monks adapted the city centuries later. Others argue the original builders, likely Phrygians or early Anatolian cultures, had already mastered this system. Historians still argue whether Derinkuyu was built in one ambitious effort or added to over centuries, each generation digging deeper into darkness. There's no clear answer, but the craftsmanship suggests continuity. A city planned like an organism, self-sustaining, self-cooling, silent. You walk onward, deeper still, and feel the temperature drop another degree. The air becomes sharper, cleaner. There's a faint echo now, your steps returning to you like someone else is following. You pause. Nothing. Just memory bouncing off rock. Ahead is a narrow doorway, shorter than most. You duck through and enter what looks unmistakably like a food storage chamber. Carved bins, some deep enough to stand in, line the walls. They're tiered, angled slightly, to allow for drainage. At one end, there's even a small stone platform that may have once been a butchering slab. Though don't worry, there's no leftover scent. The ingenuity of the design hits you again. Storage bins sealed with wax, fats, or even mud to keep pests out. Ventilation positioned to keep air moving, but not enough to spoil supplies. Some foods, like cheeses, may have even aged better down here. You squat beside one of the bins and imagine scooping out dried lentils by lamplight, hearing the faint clatter as they hit the bottom of a wooden bowl, a soft rustle of cloth, the clink of metal, simple sounds of survival. It's said the people of Derinkuyu could live for months without surfacing, maybe even longer. Everything they needed, they brought with them. Everything they didn't, they learned to go without. Fringe theories even suggest hydroponic gardening in some of the deeper, moist caverns. A stretch, perhaps, but not entirely impossible. The volcanic soil above was rich, and some experiments might have ventured downward. Historians dismiss this as speculative, but then again, so much about this place once seemed impossible. You rise, brushing dust from your knees, and head down a final corridor for this section. This one slopes downward, gently, almost imperceptibly, but you notice something peculiar. The air starts to hum. Not loud, not mechanical, just a gentle vibration in your bones, like stone remembering a song. It grows stronger as you approach a sound chamber. Yes, a chamber specifically carved to enhance resonance. A large dome with curved walls, angled precisely to bounce sound across its surface. Sing, and your voice echoes for seconds. Speak, and it whispers back to you. Some say this was used for chanting or meditation. Others believe it was simply where people gathered for music, an echo to ease the monotony. Historians still argue whether sound played a religious role here or just a psychological one. Either way it worked. You close your eyes and you hum. And for a fleeting moment, the rock hums back. The hum fades behind you as you move forward, but it lingers in your bones like the memory of thunder long after the sky has cleared. And now, something shifts. The corridors you walk through start to climb again. Not sharply, but enough that your calves begin to notice. You place one hand against the cool stone wall for balance and trail your fingers across its textured surface, carved not by nature, but by thousands of hands. Generations of fingers and tools and patient chiseling, all working in concert to carve a city out of silence. The slope levels out into a wide intersection, a rare open point where multiple tunnels converge like the spokes of a wheel. This is one of the control centres of the underground city. Here, narrow stone grooves suggest trackways, not for wheels, but for rolling barriers, giant stone discs that could be pushed across a passage and locked into place with wooden pegs. You step closer to one such groove and then spot the stone door itself, still resting upright, embedded slightly into a side alcove. It's taller than you, nearly 6 feet in diameter, perfectly round and thick, like a millstone. There's a hole in the middle. Some say it was for visibility or for a spear to be thrust through if necessary. You try to imagine the sound it made when rolled into place, that heavy scrape, that final echo of, "You can't come in." Historians still argue whether these doors were used often or only in emergencies. Some believe they were ceremonial, psychological symbols of security more than actual fortifications. Others say the layout of Derinkuyu shows deliberate defence zoning, like a medieval castle, only inverted. Either way, the doors are here, and they're still watching. You turn away, and one corridor in particular catches your eye. There's a faint scent drifting up from it, earthy, musty, but tinged with the sharp trace of cooked smoke. So you follow it. The passage narrows into a smaller room with blackened stone near the ceiling, an vent that disappears upward into darkness. You've found an underground kitchen, and not a makeshift one. This is carefully planned. There's a low flat platform for a fire pit, soot still visible around the edges. Channels carved into the floor suggest water runoff, or maybe fat drainage. A raised niche in the corner could have held spices or dried herbs. There's even the faint outline of what may have been a hanging hook for dried meat. You crouch down and place your hand on the firestone. It's cool now, of course, but someone once cooked here. Stewed lentils, baked flatbreads on hot stones, roasted onions, maybe a little wild thyme or cumin for flavour. And when they did, the smoke filtered upward through hidden vents, exiting far from the main shafts, ensuring no one above noticed the scent of a living people below. Clever, again. Some archaeologists speculate there were multiple kitchens, spaced apart to avoid overheating any one chamber. Others say families may have taken turns, or cooked communally at fixed hours. You glance back toward the intersection and see the grooves again. It all ties together. The doors, the kitchens, the airflow. This wasn't just a shelter, it was a home, and not a crude one. You move back into a tunnel that curves like a river through soft rock. The ceiling is lower here, and the walls are etched with rudimentary markings, symbols scratched with what may have been bone or flint. Some are geometric, others appear to be abstract figures. Are they religious, decorative, maps? No one knows. Some fringe theories suggest they're early forms of proto-writing, or even symbolic calendars. Others dismiss them as idle doodles made by children or bored adults. But the fact remains, these marks are deliberate. Someone wanted to leave something behind. You reach the end of the corridor and emerge into another room. This one, unlike the rest. There are no benches and no fire pits, just holes in the floor, evenly spaced perfectly round, about 2 feet deep each. Some believe these were grain storage silos. Others argue they were burial sites, a theory dismissed by most. But it lingers in the scholarly debates like smoke that won't clear. Whatever they were, their construction suggests care, each pit lined with compacted stone, some sealed with remnants of old mortar. You kneel and peer into one, nothing but darkness. Still, it watches you. Somewhere behind you, a droplet of water falls from stone to stone, echoing like a question no one's answered. You rise and turn back, but before you go far, you pause. There's a small niche in the wall near the floor, barely large enough to slip a hand into. You reach in. It's empty, just smooth stone. But once, maybe, it held something precious, a note, a relic, a piece of fruit dried to leather and forgotten. Some archaeologists have uncovered hidden stashes in similar niches, carefully wrapped jewellery, tools, even tiny religious artefacts. And here's the thing, no two rooms in Derinkuyu are exactly alike. Each space is an imprint of the people who used it, of what they feared, what they needed, what they chose to bring underground. There's no standard blueprint for survival. You walk again. The tunnel ahead slopes downward just slightly, enough that the air shifts again, and far ahead, barely visible, is the softest orange glow. Your lamp flickers, and you follow. You walk toward that distant orange shimmer like it's a candle in a long-forgotten cathedral. With each step, the glow sharpens, though it never quite illuminates the stone around it. Instead, it seems to hover, soft, indirect, like it's being reflected rather than produced. When you finally round the curve, the source becomes clear. Bioluminescent moss, not bright, not magical, just faintly aglow, enough to offer a dull greenish light where no flame could safely go. Historians still argue whether this glow was used intentionally by the city's inhabitants, or whether it spread naturally along the dampest reaches of the tunnels. But it's here, regardless, faint, cool, and pulsing with time. This part of the city is older. You can feel it in your feet. The rock underfoot has worn into slight grooves, where thousands of footsteps pass through. And the air is heavier, warmer now, almost humid. Somewhere nearby there must be underground water. You follow the moss trail until it gives way to dry stone again. And then, there it is. A cistern, not a small one either. A deep circular chamber with an open shaft in its centre, stone-lined and perfectly symmetrical. Looking down, you can't see the bottom, but you hear it, a slow drip of water landing on water. A deep, resonant splash, each one spaced just far enough apart to sound deliberate, like time ticking. You imagine people gathering here with earthen jars, carefully dipping, carrying, rationing. Water was the true currency of Derinkuyu, not gold, not grain. Some believe these deep cisterns tapped into ancient aquifers, natural underground lakes untouched by surface contamination. Others argue that rainfall was channeled downward through cleverly hidden collectors above. Either way, it worked. The city lived. And you sip the air like it's water too. Cool, musty, rich with volcanic minerals and the memory of limestone. Now the corridor veers, almost as if it's dodging something. You follow, stepping into a long, narrow chamber with low ledges running along either wall. Each ledge has indentations carved into it, shallow, person-length side by side. There are dozens. This was a sleeping quarter. No beds, no privacy, just space for bodies to rest. Together. The stone is smoothed where heads may have laid. Grooves at the feet suggest something once tethered here. Perhaps fabric or mats. Or maybe, if you're being romantic, a blanket passed from hand to hand and folded into the wall each morning. You lie down in one of the niches just for a moment. It fits you, not comfortably, not like memory foam, but it fits the way history fits, close enough to recognise, far enough to respect. And here's something else. There are tiny carvings on the inside wall, simple markings like hash lines or slashes, a child's count of days maybe, or prayers, or just something to do in the dark. You imagine whole families lying in silence, hearing only breath and drip and silence again. What did they talk about? Did they whisper? Did they sing? One archaeologist claimed to have found a carved flute here. Others say that was misattributed. But whether made music or not, this place has its own rhythm. Stone doesn't need notes to hum. You leave the sleeping room and wander into a space unlike the rest, decorated. Not extravagantly, but deliberately. The walls are whitewashed in patches flecked with faded red ochre. There are simple line drawings, fish, crosses, and a sun-like symbol repeated in a circular pattern. You're standing in one of Derinkuu's chapels, not a massive cathedral, but enough for 20 people to kneel side by side. At the far end, a low altar platform remains, and behind it, a niche where a relic or icon may have been placed. Empty now. Some believe the city was built, or later used, by early Christians, fleeing Roman persecution. The fish symbols suggest this. Others insist the structure predates Christianity entirely, and the markings were added later. Historians still argue whether Derinkuyu was ever purely Christian, or if it housed mixed religious groups across time. You run your hand along the altar and notice faint scorch marks, candles likely, and something else, 2 tiny holes bored into the stone floor in front of it, possibly for mounting a rail or tying off animals, or something we simply don't understand anymore. Time has erased the context, but not the imprint. You sit on the floor now, just listening. The silence down here is not really silent. It hums, it breathes, it has weight, like being underwater without the pressure. Then, without warning, the silence is broken. A voice. No, not real. Just your own footstep echoing back down the tunnel. Still for a heartbeat, you feel it. The sense of being watched gently. You shake it off. Mostly. You leave the chapel and find yourself in a passage that begins to rise. Slightly, but persistently. Soon the air grows cooler again. Drier. You've been travelling through the lowest levels and now, imperceptibly, the city begins to lift you. Ahead a doorway, rounded and wide. You enter a communal hall, larger than most, with high ceilings and a single central pillar. Along the walls, deep carved cubbies, storage maybe, or, some suggest, bookshelves. There's no sign of books, of course, but there are traces of pigment in a few recesses. Theories abound. Perhaps a library, perhaps ceremonial storage, perhaps just wishful thinking. And that's what this place invites. Not just exploration, but imagination. It doesn't just hide its secrets, it makes you want to invent them. You stand in the centre of the hall, look up, and find the shaft above you leads to the surface again. It's narrow, maybe just enough to squeeze through, but not yet. You're not ready to leave. You stand beneath that narrow shaft for just a moment longer, listening to the echo of your own heartbeat as it folds into the hush. There's air moving up there, cooler, drier, edged with the memory of sunlight. But you turn away from it. The surface can wait. There's more down here, not in darkness, but in absence. You take another corridor, this one unusually smooth. The walls lack the typical tool marks. Instead, they've been polished by centuries of touch, like the handrails in an old cathedral staircase. At intervals, there are small hollowed alcoves. These were communication points. Acoustic testing suggests that certain alcoves allowed for sound to carry along specific shafts. Not shouting, but murmurs. Imagine a mother whispering a name into a hollow in one chamber, and her son, 2 levels below, turning his head at the sound. Historians still argue whether this design was intentional or simply a happy accident of volcanic tuff and trial and error excavation. Either way, it worked. Sound moved, and people stayed connected. You step into one such alcove and speak, just a breath really. But the stone sings back, low and eerie, like a wine glass barely touched. You smile, because even ghosts get lonely, and so you follow the corridor further until it opens into something strange. A room shaped not like a square or a circle, but like a spiral. It twists inward, step by step, toward a central pit, perhaps 10 feet across and deep enough that you can't see the bottom. You pause on the edge, feeling the gravity of it. What was this? Theories diverge wildly here. Some say it was a well, though its depth and shape make that doubtful. Others insist it was a ritual space, a kind of descending theatre where participants walked slowly toward the centre. Still others wonder if it was symbolic, a model of the cosmos carved into the earth, a memory of order in a world that had become chaos. You run your hand along the spiral path. The steps are shallow, worn smooth. Someone walked here, 1,000 someones over 1,000 nights. You don't go all the way in. It doesn't feel like a place to enter, just to know. And so you climb out and keep walking until the tunnel sharpens again, straightening into a narrow passage with a slight incline. The air changes. It's colder and laced with something sharp. You know it before you see it. This is a ventilation shaft, but not just any vent. This one's massive, almost 2 feet wide, running vertically, up and up and up. Scholars have tracked these shafts and found that some extend all the way to the surface, sometimes emerging miles from the nearest entrance. Others dead end, blocked intentionally, to confuse, to protect. The air you breathe now has travelled a long way, past soil and stone, through layers of rock and possibly snow, to find its way into this quiet space. It's fresh and a little damp, with that alpine crispness that smells faintly like pine bark and storm clouds. You follow the air to the next chamber, and what you find there is not what you expect. A stable, underground. It's not large, enough for a few animals, donkeys, maybe goats. There are troughs carved into the stone, shallow basins worn smooth from use, and a loop carved in one wall for tethering. It's absurd and practical all at once. You picture a donkey down here, munching quietly in the dark, as families sleep nearby. You wonder if it ever tried to bray and scared someone half to death. One archaeologist once claimed to find hoof marks fossilised in the dust. Another argued they were just depressions from wooden buckets. No one agrees, but the space smells right. You leave the stable and descend again. Not far, just enough to feel the weight return to the air. And then, in the quiet, you hear something soft, not dripping, not wind, but music, a memory of it anyway. You've entered a resonant room, carved with curved walls and a domed ceiling, perfect for sound. And there in the corner is a small ledge, low, wide, smoothed by touch and time. A drum maybe, a seat for the storyteller, a teacher's platform. This wasn't just a shelter, it was a society, a school, a sanctuary. Children must have laughed here. People must have argued, debated, sung lullabies. You speak again, just a hum, and it expands, curling around the chamber like incense smoke. You realise how quiet the world must have been when this was full. No motorbikes, no airplanes, no phones, just voice and stone. The corridor beyond slopes upward again. The city breathes in layers, descending and lifting like a sleeping body. And just ahead, you see the remnants of a collapsed passage. Stone fallen, dust thick. blocked long ago, but behind it, maybe more. No one's cleared it, and maybe no one should, because Derinkuyu doesn't give up all its stories. Some it keeps, like secrets tucked into the folds of sleep. You stand before the rubble and listen one more time, and the silence holds you. You leave the blocked passage behind and step into another corridor, one that feels slightly wider, like it was carved not just for function, but for movement. Foot traffic, trade maybe, or processions. The walls here are smoother than most, intentional, almost polished, and spaced at regular intervals are niches, some square, some arched. Storage, perhaps, or shrines, or both. You pause at one, running your fingers along the shallow ledge. It's been worn smooth by centuries of hands reaching for something. A lamp, a loaf of bread, a symbol pressed in the dark for reassurance. And then you spot it, faint but still visible, a carving, a palm with outstretched fingers, simple and stylized. Some archaeologists say these represent blessings or protection symbols. Others argue they mark burial zones, places where the dead once lay in repose before being moved, or left. Historians still debate how many people truly lived in Derinkuyu. Some suggest no more than a few hundred at a time, rotating in and out with the needs of the seasons. Others insist it supported thousands during crises. Up to 20,000, they say, though that number seems to echo louder than it rings true. Even if the real figure was less, this place was built with continuity in mind. Not just survival, but return, inheritance, a cycle. You reach the next room, and it stops you in your tracks. It's tall, unexpectedly so. A vertical shaft chamber, roughly circular, where the ceiling stretches higher than your lamp can fully reach. The walls are notched, footholds, or perhaps a pulley system once dangled here. Historians suggest this was a grain elevator, a place where food was stored and redistributed downward through baskets or sacks. The notches allowed people to climb or hang tools, or perhaps decorations. Imagine the grain here, golden piles against dark stone, and the smell. Dusty, sweet, earthy, a scent that would mean life, security, the difference between making it through winter or not. You move on. The next chamber is low again, jarringly so. You have to stoop to enter, and once inside, the ceiling remains barely above your head. This was a defensive passage. If invaders ever found their way in, they'd have to crawl, one by one, while residents, already crouched and used to the dark, weighted with stones and poles. There are rolling stone doors still visible at the entrance, circular, with a central hole, like giant millstones. They could be rolled across the entryway and locked from within using wooden beams. Not elegant, but effective. One story claims that when Derinkuyu was rediscovered in the 1960s by a man renovating his basement, a dog ran into a wall and vanished. When the owner removed a stone slab, he found a long-lost tunnel, and thus an entire city came back to light. Whether the story's true or not, historians still raise eyebrows at the timeline. It makes you smile. Because dogs, as we've seen, are often the real archaeologists. Beyond the defence corridor, you find a room shaped like a wedge, narrow at one end, wide at the other. Its purpose, why, still uncertain. Some believe it was a gathering space, a kind of town hall. Others think it was a teaching room with the teacher's seat at the narrow tip, like a conductor at the bow of a ship. And yes, that shape, it does feel nautical, submarine, like this whole place could lift and drift away through stone currents, rising slowly toward light. You step through an archway carved into the wedge wall and feel the air change again. Softer, more humid. You've reached the baths, or at least what we believe were used as such. A basin sits low in the centre, carved into the floor. Water must have been ladled in, warmed perhaps by body heat or stone friction. And around it, shallow channels curve into the walls. These may have drained water or simply marked washing zones. Some suggest this chamber was also used for ritual purification, perhaps before worship, or marriage, or burial. You trail your fingers through the air as if feeling steam that's no longer there. You almost think you can smell it, clean, mineral-rich, edged with ancient lavender. Or maybe that's just the power of suggestion. Your brain fills in the missing pieces. One archaeologist claimed the people here used soapstone pebbles to scrub themselves. Another insisted they used ash and oil. And one, only half joking, suggested they used volcanic sand, exfoliating centuries before spa culture caught on. You smile again. Because wherever humans go, cleanliness follows. Or at least the attempt. You leave the chamber and walk along a new passage. This one curves ever so slightly left, hugging a ridge of untouched bedrock. And then, there it is, the hearth, a communal kitchen larger than any other space so far. Ash stains still darken the ceiling in a spidery fan. Stone counters remain, pitted and cracked from heat and time. A chimney shaft rises from the centre, a true engineering marvel. It's carved with slight curves to disguise the smoke trail from above. Remember those ventilation shafts? This one's smarter. It breathes without being seen. You imagine soup bubbling here, bread baking, voices rising and falling in rhythm with chopping, stirring, scraping, and laughter. Because yes, even underground people laugh. You pick up a stone ladle left on the counter. Too heavy to use now, but once it would have felt just right. And somewhere nearby someone probably grumbled that the soup was too thin. Traditions run deep. The kitchen air still smells different, like it remembers onions and wood smoke, and the warmth of so many winters passed in shelter. You exhale slowly. Derinkuyu is not a ruin. It's a preserved pause and a moment in civilization's long breath, held underground for centuries. The hearth leaves a warmth in your chest long after you've stepped away from it. Not from fire, of course, there's none left, but from the echo of life, held in stone like a lingering ember. You continue down the tunnel, guided now by instinct more than plan. These passages fold into one another like a labyrinth built from memory and necessity. You can feel the city breathing, its chambers rising and falling like lungs. As you descend again, just slightly, your footsteps slow. Not from exhaustion, but reverence. The corridor tightens and the ceiling dips, not quite forcing you to crouch, but making you bow, just a little. A subtle reminder, this next part is sacred. The chamber opens, not large but solemn. The floor is lower than the corridor, carved into a broad, flat basin. Raised platforms hug the edges, benches or perhaps altars, and the walls are lined with shallow niches just tall enough to hold a standing figure. Some still hold fragments, worn shapes that might once have been statues. This is believed to be a chapel, or perhaps something older, stranger, a ritual space not fully deciphered. Historians still argue whether this was a Christian church built during the early Byzantine period, when persecuted communities sought refuge underground, or if it predates that entirely, perhaps a pre-Christian sacred hall, later repurposed and baptized by newer faiths. The cross carved into the far wall is unmistakable, but so is the symbol beneath it, spiraled, abstract, not quite pagan, but not quite familiar either. You step inside. The acoustics are extraordinary. A whisper returns to you not once but twice. Soft echoes layered like a harmony. You picture people sitting along the benches shoulder to shoulder, eyes closed, voices raised, not loudly, but together. A hymn maybe, or a story passed down. Something like hope. Someone once lit a candle in here, There's wax still dripped across the stone floor, dried mid-pool, like it froze while falling. Time crystallized. You like nothing, of course, but the stillness feels illuminated anyway. There are marks in the floor too, shallow grooves, maybe the legs of furniture, or lines worn from pacing. One archaeologist noted that the grooves form a vague triangle, pointing toward the niche with the spiral cross. Coincidence? Or geometry with meaning? You reach down and touch one of the grooves. Stone is slow to forget. The chamber opens on the far end into a small anteroom where flat stones are stacked against the wall. Not part of the original build. These were repairs. It seems the underground city wasn't just carved, it was maintained, reinforced, cared for. A reminder that this was never just a refuge in crisis. It was home. From the anteroom, you take another left and feel the air grow cooler again. The scent changes, sharper, mineral-rich. You've entered a storage level. Here the rooms are more regular, boxy, functional, with carved bins and shelves, all built directly into the walls. These held food, clothing, tools. Even now some grains remain, carbon dated to over 1,000 years old. Tiny seeds of time sleeping in the dust. One archaeologist found a copper hairpin here, bent and green with age, too delicate to use now, but imagine the person who lost it. Was she brushing her hair in the dark, or racing to hide something as strangers pounded above? You continue through these rooms, feeling the purpose behind every notch and groove. This wasn't improvised, it was engineered. Some shelves are wider than others, big enough to hold amphorae, those clay vessels used to store olive oil and wine. And yes, there's residue on the floor, a faint ring of red-brown dust, wine spilled long ago. An accident or a celebration? You'll never know, but it's oddly comforting. Farther on, the storage chambers give way to a series of sleeping quarters, smaller, more intimate. These were likely for individual families, each carved out just enough space to sleep, maybe to pray, maybe to whisper dreams in the dark. No doors, but thresholds remain, marked by low ridges carved into the floor. You pause at one such threshold and step inside. It's just a room. No decoration, no artifacts, but it feels full, not cluttered, but inhabited. You sit on the stone ledge along the wall, what must have been a bed, softened once by cloth, maybe straw. You close your eyes, and you can almost hear breathing. A family huddled together. One child sighs in sleep. Another stirs, tugging a blanket. Someone murmurs a prayer. Someone else snores. It's not eerie, it's warm. The kind of silence only humans can make. And then slowly, you stand again. Because the city's not done. One last chamber waits, a space carved in an unusual shape. Octagonal, symmetrical, balanced. Theories abound about this room. Some say it was a council hall. Others think it was a ritual bath. One even claimed it was a kind of courtroom where disputes were settled in the round. There's no furniture left, of course, but the symmetry is undeniable. And above, at the peak of the dome ceiling, there's a hole, a skylight, or something older. Maybe, just maybe, the builders wanted one place where light could fall directly from the heavens, once a year, or maybe just once ever. You stand in the centre beneath that invisible beam, and you feel the quiet of the city all around you, not hollow, but held. Derinkuyu was never abandoned, only forgotten, and now remembered again. You take one final breath beneath the imagined skylight, and as you step away from the octagonal chamber, the passage begins to narrow again. Not in a menacing way, just gently, as though the city itself is guiding you back, like a host walking you to the door. You retrace your steps, not in reverse, but in rhythm. Every chamber now feels familiar, less like ruins, more like rooms in a home you once knew. And as you move, the dust underfoot softens, quieter. Even your footsteps seem to hesitate, reluctant to leave. Back through the storage rooms, the little beds, the chapel, the grain silo, the kitchen's long-cooled hearth. Each space hums with the memory of those who lived here, and those who died here too. Historians still debate the timeline of Derinkuyu. Was it built in a rush, or layered slowly over centuries, each level carved by a new generation with different fears? Was it a response to Roman persecution, Arab raids, Ottoman pressures, or was it simply a continuation of something older, something deeper, where going underground wasn't escape but custom? There's evidence of Hittite tunnels, carved as early as 1200 BCE, much older than the Christian refugees of late antiquity. And that raises the question, were the Christians the builders or the inheritors? The stone doesn't care, it only keeps. And now, back in the wider corridor that connects to the original well shaft, you find one last chamber. It's small, unmarked, half-finished maybe. The ceiling is rough, not yet smoothed, and a pile of rubble lies in one corner. But along one wall there's a peculiar carving, etched cleanly, with care. It's a maze and not sprawling but dense. No exit is clear. Some think it was a map. Others call it a symbol of protection, a charm to confuse evil spirits. Still others argue it's a metaphor, etched here by one of the final diggers. Someone who understood the city's shape better than any outsider ever would. A place of complexity, of darkness and shelter. And for just a moment, it looks like something else entirely. A brain, folded, layered, alive. Maybe this city isn't just a feat of engineering. Maybe it's a kind of thought, preserved in rock. A stone mind where fear and resilience etched out every passage, every shelf, every sloping stair. A collective imagination made habitable. You stand in the final passage now. Above you the well shaft stretches upward. It's quiet, still, but then a shift in air, cooler, sweeter, fresh. You've reached a vent. One of the many breathing holes that fed this place with light and air for centuries. Remember that detail? That Derinkuyu's ventilation system was so advanced it could support tens of thousands of people without smoke or suffocation? This is one of those ancient miracles. You lean in and look up. The shaft goes higher than you can see, straight through stone, a perfect vertical. And at the very top, so faint you almost imagine it, you see a tiny glimmer. Not the sun, not the sky, but maybe the moon. You smile? Because that feels right. Above all this, above the weight of earth and memory and history, there's still a world out there. And now so is Derinkuyu, no longer lost, no longer silent, a city carved by hand, lived in by thousands, hidden from the world, and now whispered into dreams. You turn back one last time and glance down the darkened corridor. The air holds steady. The walls hum with quiet, and somewhere, far below or far within, someone once sighed into sleep. Just like you will soon. So now, your journey comes to a close. You've walked through rooms carved before electricity, breathed the same air as people who clutched each other in silence, hoping danger would pass, laughed at old soup pots, traced candle wax hardened by centuries, wandered through grain silos, family beds, and stairwells built to vanish under the weight of the earth, all beneath the surface, all beneath time. You've seen how people lived, not in palaces but in stone, how they slept in warmth carved from cold, how they prayed, cooked, loved and protected while the world rumbled above. And now, as you lie in your own bed, soft, familiar, quiet, you can let your breath slow, let your eyes drift closed, Whatever fears tomorrow may bring, you're not beneath them. You are above the dust, above the silence, above the city, but you carry it with you now, like a pocket of calm tucked beneath the noise. And in that stillness, you can rest. You've walked far tonight, through shadowed halls and hollowed earth, through time and memory and rooms without light. Let them fade now. Let it all sink gently into the quiet. Let your thoughts soften, fold and vanish, just like footsteps in sand.